Good morning. Thank you for having me here. I'm Roger. I'm a fourth-generation Christian, and I'm going to try to summarize what I've learned in 47 years in half an hour. I've done this before, so it should be okay. Life started fairly comfortable for me. So much so that I was very arrogant. I was very proud of a family business, and that I just assumed that one day when I grew up, I would go and run that business. But when I was 13, some of my family members, they brought in an outside business person, and basically they stole the business away from my dad. And my dad tried to fight them for about a year, and then he lost in that battle. So when I was 14, I was painfully aware that I no longer had that business to look forward to. I realized that my dad no longer had work, and I realized that he no longer had income. And the worst thing is I lost my sense of security of over-provision. I became completely insecure. And what made it even worse was that my dad wanted to leave Hong Kong. He felt there was nothing left for him to do here. So he brought our family to Vancouver. And my personality took a 180-degree turn. I became super unhappy. I became driven by fear and anger. And I wanted revenge. I wanted revenge so badly that I started to work very hard, which is good in itself, but the motivation was all wrong. And I saw that everyone was my enemy. I felt I had to beat everybody so that I could have a chance to succeed. So it's doing the right things but for all the wrong reasons. And that succeeded for a bit. I mean, it got me to a very good school in the U.S. and it got me into good jobs. But you know, it really distorted my personality, and I cared about no one else, and all I wanted was to make money and to get promoted, which was really, really unhealthy. But praise to be God, in 2003, he brought me back to him. I mean, on and off I was going to church for many, many years, but you know, it was all head knowledge, and you know, Jesus was not in my heart. So through an ex-colleague who's a church member, thank you to her persistence, that she kept asking me to go to her life group. And most of the time I would just smile at her and think that, you know, there's no way I'll go to your life group. You don't know what you're asking me. And it was through two bad things that happened to me in 2003 that God used it as a wake-up call. And I felt really, really depressed. And when the same ex-colleague asked me, will you come to my life group that Sunday at church, I felt, well, what else have I got to lose? I've already lost everything. And so I went to the life group, and from that point onwards, everything started to change. For starters, I realized that people in life groups, they're not saints either. They have a lot of issues. And I felt comfortable immediately because at least half of the life group members probably didn't know the Bible as well as I did. So I felt, you know, I fit into the life group, and they became friends. And for the first time, I really paid attention to listening to other people's problems and not just focusing on myself. And that really made a world of difference. That taught me to serve other people and not just focus exclusively on my own self-interest. Another really good thing about the life group was we did a lot of outreach events. So I started to go to some of the poorer areas of Hong Kong to visit some of the elderly people who lived by themselves, and to just bring them some small gift bags. And I saw how happy they were with just, you know, a small token of of a gift and spending a little bit of time with them. I mean, that meant so much to them. And that started to really soften my heart. And within 6 months, you know, our community church, you know, takes a lot of risk. They allowed me to start leading that life group. So it became a priority for me. And back then I was still working in banking and I had to travel a lot. But I made it a point to definitely get back to Hong Kong by Thursday evening so that I could attend this life group. So that started to change me. It started to care for other people and to also to learn to serve the church. But then my deepest wound was really over money, in that my birthright was stolen from me, and that what I deemed to be my future was taken away from me. So God started to heal me in that area starting in 2005, and it took 10 years. It was a 10-year journey, and I must be a really slow student because all he taught me was one Bible verse, and it's in your bulletin. If you have a copy of your bulletin, I'd like you to read it with me. It's Micah chapter 6, verse 8. He has shown you, O mortal, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? To act justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. Now, when my healing first began, I didn't really know this verse. And what I'm about to tell you, this will sound completely crazy, but this is exactly in this sequence. That God taught me to act justly, and then He taught me to love mercy, and then He taught me to walk humbly with Him. So in 2005, I heard a sermon at community church on tithing for the first time. Now maybe your first logical question is, what is tithing? In essence, tithing means you bring the first fruits, or the first part of your income. Not your leftovers, not after you pay for rent, you pay for tax, you pay for utilities, after you buy your food, and then if you have leftover money, that's not your tithe. The tithe it's the very first part of your income, and it's 10%, and you bring that to your place of worship. So that would be your local church. So that was the first time I ever heard about this. It's kind of shocking. At that point I had gone to church for 30-some years, and that was the first full-length sermon that I heard on tithing. At that point, I'm a bit ashamed to admit, I was not living a biblical life. I was not following any areas of the Bible at all. Surprisingly, I thought to myself, well, why don't I start with the area of money to be the area that I actually obey God's word in? Now, part of the motivation is the next verse I have in the bulletin, and that is Malachi chapter 3, verse 10. It's a promise and a test, and not just a test. It's the only test in the whole Bible where God invites us to test Him in. Okay, so this is precious. Malachi 3:10 reads, "Bring the whole tithe," meaning that your first 10% of your income, "into the storehouse," meaning your local church, "that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty. Amen. And see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it." So this sounded like a money-back guarantee to me at the time. So God is saying, if you have a little bit of faith, try me on this. Try it. You don't have to, and because it reads like a test, I felt that it meant that I could go at my own pace. So I didn't go from 0 to full tithe immediately. It took me 2 years. to go from 0 to 10% on my whole income, whether it's my base salary and the year-end bonus that I got. So, and because the fact that it took 2 years to do and God did not punish me for taking so long, I think it's okay. But I think it is definitely a goal that you should work towards. Start really, really small. Start with 1% of your income. And then just see. Be mindful of what you're trying to do, and then just partner with God and witness what He starts to do in your life. Now, let me throw in a word of caution. I am not talking about prosperity gospel. So, because this is actually the biggest, I think this is one of the biggest secrets in the whole universe. And basically, the schematic is God freely gives things to us, and if we receive it with open hands, and if we're willing to help other people with open hands, and then He sees that we're being good stewards, or we're basically being good fund managers of His, and He will give us more, because to Him, giving us an extra 0 in our bank account means nothing to Him. He can do it like this. And as long as we have our heart is in the right place, that we are not owned by money, but money is just a tool for us to do good, to do His will, to help those who are in need, then He's very happy to bless us. That's not a problem to Him. So first the lesson was on tithing, to put God first in our finances. So that was the first lesson of, now how do I justify that with Micah 6:8, the first part of acting justly? If you look at the next verse in the bulletin, this is the rationale why I say this is called acting justly. The flip side of not tithing caused God to say this in Malachi chapter 3 verse 8. Will a mere mortal rob God? Yet you rob me. But you ask, how are we robbing you? And God says, in tithes and offerings. So God was angry at people, and He actually said, you're robbing me by not tithing. So, in other words, a lot of times, a lot of us, we fail to honor God in recognizing that everything that we have comes from Him. We fail to recognize and honor Him that He is our ultimate provider. He is Jehovah Jireh, the God who provides. And in 1 Samuel chapter 2 verse 30, God says, those who honor me, I will honor. So we believe in an all-powerful God. We believe in an all-knowing God. If this is how God wants us to honor Him, and He promises that He's going to honor those who honors Him, and He also gives you another promise in Malachi chapter 6 verse 8, that in Malachi chapter 3 verse 10, that He's going to pour out so much blessing that you cannot even take it in. Why not give it a try? Why not give it a try? Okay, so after 2 years of learning how to tithe, I was, again feeling some spiritual pride. I thought, Roger, you have arrived. You're now a good steward. Now, God has a great sense of humor. Whenever I feel that I've arrived, He will then show me the next lesson. The next lesson took the longest out of that 10-year journey, and I'll explain to you. In 2007, my then senior pastor, he said to me, oh, there's a South Asian brother I'd like you to meet. He has got some money problems. So I went to the meeting room. I expected there to be other people. I did not expect the pastor to just call me to solve his problem for this brother. But it turned out he only asked me to go. So I thought, gee, thank you very much. So I sat down with his brother. I recognize who he is, but I've never spoken to him before. It turns out that he borrowed about 3 years worth of his wages from a loan shark. And according to him, they threatened to seriously harm him if he could not repay in 3 days. So I looked at him, I looked at the pastor, and I thought, the responsibility seems to be resting on me. Now, partly because of my fear of money and my hurt over money, I tended to save a lot. I didn't spend so much. I tended to save a lot of money. So I had it in my bank account to help him. Now, I looked at how helpless this brother was, and I just asked him 3 questions. I said, is this because of a drug problem? He said, no. I said, is this because of a gambling problem? He said, no. And then I said, last question, and this is probably the most important question. Is this the full amount that you owe? Meaning, if you repay this amount, is this going to spare your life? Because the worst thing that could happen is, I help you out with this week, with this amount, which is pretty large. And then next week you come back and tell me there's actually more. Now that would really make me angry. So he said, no, this is the whole amount. This will save my life, basically. So I thought that, well, there must be a reason God brought me to this situation. So there must be a purpose in bringing me, to be the only one here to solve this problem for him. And I was so naive to think that, well, this is done at church, in front of my pastor. It never crossed my mind that he will not repay me. So now, I didn't know the Old Testament in the Bible so well back then, but what I structured as the deal to help him, even a priest from the Old Testament, he would have put, check on all the details. So first thing I said, okay, I will write you a check in that full amount, and I will charge you no interest. Now, this amount is, 3 years worth of your salary. Now, what if we divide this into 60 installments over 5 years? Will this be affordable to you to repay? And the guy said, yes. So, and I thought, well, my only downside is I will not have access to that money for a few years, which means I cannot use it for other purposes. But I'm sure that God will give me some brownie points for doing a deed of kindness. So that was that. I wrote him a check. He paid the loan shark, and nobody touched him. So that was good. Now, so every month, the repayment was like clockwork. Every first Sunday of the month at church, he would give me an envelope, very timely, for 12 months. And then the 13th month, it skipped. The next month, he paid me, and then he skipped 2 months, he paid me once, and then he skipped 3 months, and then he paid me once. So after 2 years, it all stopped. And then this is where the homework really started. Can I feel angry about this? Can I speak to him about this? And if I do speak to him, with what attitude can I speak to him? And this gave me, and he didn't stop coming to our church. So I see him every Sunday. And that gave me so much homework to do in my heart. And I kept thinking about it, and then over time I became more and more well-versed in the Bible. There is a parable in Matthew chapter 18, the parable of the unmerciful servant. So basically, in a nutshell, if I put myself in that story, potentially I could be the unmerciful servant. I owe a king $1 billion. He asked me to repay him, and I said, sorry, I don't have the money, please forgive me. He actually forgives me. And then I have another friend, he owes me $100. He doesn't have the money. I ask him to repay. He says the same thing to me, sorry, I don't have the money, please forgive me. But instead of forgiving him, I choke him and then I throw him into jail. So the king finds out about this, and then he says, you're wicked. You know, you're gonna go into jail, and I'm gonna basically torture your whole family as well. So, do I want to be the unmerciful servant? No, I don't think that's very wise. So from that point onwards, I decided, no, I'm not going to get angry with this brother. Yes, he owes me a little bit of money, but I owe Jesus infinitely more.
Right.
So I'm not going to be angry with him. And I just kind of let it slip. I mean, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do either. Maybe I should have said something, had a nice conversation with him just to find out what's happening in his life. But I just chose not to say anything. And then a few more years just went by. And then one day, I still remember exactly where I was standing at church. For the first time, I heard God speaking to me, and I could hear it audibly. The first time God talks to me, he asked me this, when did you lend money to this brother? And it was so long ago, I actually had to spend like 15-30 seconds to think about the answer. And I thought, 2007. And then immediately the pin dropped. That year was 2014. So it had been 7 years ago. Now at that point, I was even better versed with the Old Testament and the Bible. The 7th year, according to in the Torah, the 7th year is the year of debt forgiveness. So I believe that is why God chose to speak to me audibly for the first time, is basically to ask me, are you willing to obey my word? It had been, so I thought, well, if the first time that God Almighty speaks to me has a direct communication with me, and if I choose to ignore him, that's basically not giving him any face. That's not very clever either. So, and because, you know, all these years God had provided for me, and I had been accustomed to not having this money back. So I thought, for all these reasons, I'll just go to this brother, and I said to him, you know, basically, let's cancel our debt. You don't owe me anymore. Ever since, he has become a good friend of mine, and he has blessed me in a lot of different ways. So praise be to God. So the first lesson on learning to tithe took 2 years. This long lesson of learning to love mercy took 7 years. So 9 years. And at that point I thought, wow, you definitely arrived now, Roger. You must be a good steward. You tithe, you lend to people in need, and you even forgive their debt in the year of debt forgiveness when God asks you. And God, once again, has a great sense of humor. He then showed me the third lesson. At the end of 2014, I developed an anxiety attack, or panic attacks. The reason for that, for having panic attacks, was over money. So immediately I knew, well, you haven't arrived yet, Roger, because if you are so together, if you have fully arrived in the area of money, you would not be suffering from a panic attack because of money. So what happened was, ever since I started tithing in 2007, my income just kept going down, 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 down every year. So much for prosperity gospel. To me, there is no such thing. So it went so low to the point where, at that point I got married, I have 2 kids, I have a mortgage, and just because my income went down, I did not want to decrease my support for my parents to decrease. I did not want support to my grandmother to decrease just because my income decreased. So for every month starting in January in 2014, I had negative cash flow, meaning that I spent more than I had income coming in. So by the end of the year, in December, I was basically staring at this hole of negative cash flow. And that must be the reason that triggered my anxiety attack. I prayed to God. I said, Lord, I'm not being greedy, but can you please give me a year-end bonus to cover this, little hole that I'm staring at. God is faithful. Beginning of 2015, He gave me a bonus exactly that size to cover that deficit. But then I thought, well, God, is this the way you want me to live from now on? I mean, this is not a good way to live. And then around the same time, there was a course that I brought to community church. It's called the Crown Financial Course. And the first lesson, the first Bible verse that they quoted was Psalm 24, verse 1. It basically says, the whole earth and everything in it, it belongs to the Lord. Immediately, I knew what my problem was for the last 20-some years, or even all my life. My problem was I was on a revenue split model with God. $100 comes in, the first 10 is yours, God. The other 90, that's mine. How I save, how I spend, how I plan for the future, that's all mine. That's all my issues. Thank you very much. Now, that is the dumbest thing you can do. Why do I say that? The Bible has more promises about God taking care of us, providing for us, than anything else. That is the #1 promise in the whole Bible. If I take on this kind of stance that, first 10 is yours, the rest is mine, then basically I'm saying, I don't need your help. Thank you very much. Now, how foolish can that be? And once I recognize that actually it all belongs to God and that He's promised to take care of me, and I review my life up to this point, I've been scared a lot of times, I've panicked a lot of times, but has the Lord ever not come through and provided for me? No. So immediately I sense a huge sense of relief that I'm just a steward. Whatever He gives me, it's not really mine. I just have to do whatever He tells me to with the things that I've been given, and He will keep providing for me. So that took away my anxiety attack. So this is the 10-year journey on how I learned to be a steward. And this is basically the whole of Micah 6:8. In terms of money, that I need to act justly, which is to tithe, to love mercy, basically whenever there's someone in need, you pray, and if God tells you should help that person, you do that. And then to walk humbly with your God, meaning the recognition that it all belongs to Him, and that your ability to even breathe today, to live, and to think, and to be able to earn money, to earn a living, all that comes from God. So it was a 10-year journey just to learn to be a steward. And I realize that I'm going to run out of time soon. So I'm just going to share with you one story. And this is a really cool story. So after He took 10 years to teach me to be a steward, and then He started to speak to me more often. Direct dialogue. But the direct dialogue is to be generous. So this story happened in 2016. And I was at church one day. The seat next to mine was empty. And then some Caucasian brother came in very late. He brought a music case with him, and he sat down. He looks exactly like Kenny G. You know who Kenny G is? The guy with the saxophone player? He also had brought a saxophone case with him. So I took another look at him just to see if he's really Kenny G. Now the next thing he brought out captured my attention even more. He brought out a really old Bible. So old, and it was so underlined, and it's got notes written all over the margins. I was like, wow, this guy really must study the Bible a lot. I need to say hi to him. So I introduced myself and then found out he is indeed a musician. He just lost his job on a cruise ship, so now he's stuck in Hong Kong. He's playing saxophone in Central, just in the streets to make money. And then our worship team doesn't have a saxophone player, so I thought, well, we can upgrade and have a saxophone on the worship band. So I introduced him to the worship team. Once they started talking, then I heard God speak to me audibly. He said 3 words: give him money. So I walked away a little bit. I took out my wallet and I checked how much cash I had on me. I had 2 $500 notes on me. So I had 3 decisions. I had 3 options. 1, ignore that I heard from God. 2, give half the cash I had on me to this brother. Or the last option, empty my wallets to a complete stranger. I chose the last option. So I walked back to him and I said, excuse me, there's something I'd like to speak to you about. Can we step aside? So we stepped aside, I gave him the money, and then I asked him, so what brought you to our church today? I've never seen you here before. And then he said, this morning God told me to come to this church because someone was going to give me money to help me. So even though this is probably the 100th time I've told this story, I still feel this like electric current going through my body as I tell the story. And you can imagine how shocked I was that day. Basically, out of my obedience, I was able to be part of a small miracle. So there are lots and lots of other stories, which, if you invite me back, I'm happy to share with you. But I think the key message is our God is a generous God. If you look at John 3:16, God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. For whose benefit? For our benefit. I mean, you cannot outgive God. And money to him means nothing.
Yes.
He wants to take first place in our hearts. He doesn't want us to be slaves to money. Jesus said, you can either serve God or you serve money. You cannot serve 2 masters. And God loves us so much that he gives us the ability to choose. The only issue is, it is the deceitfulness of wealth that makes a lot of Christians unfruitful in their lives. It's the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of money that chokes us, that makes us unfruitful. Can you imagine what the world will be like if every Christian really believed that God is the provider and that they will be more willing and open to help others with their time, their talent, and their money? I guarantee the world will be a totally different place. So now I've quit working in banking. I am now I'm spending the rest of my life, God willing, to break the deceitfulness of wealth and to bring more glory to him. All glory and praise to the Lord. God bless you all. Thank you.